bowl turning we do, we start off with really green wood. Sometimes it's green enough that it throws water all over you while you're trying to turn it, but I don't know if that'll happen tonight, but it might. So that's what we're going to show that. We're going to get that first step of getting the bowl roughed out to a thickness that it will dry. There's a problem with green wood if you have a big, thick chunk, and this isn't real thick, but it'll never get dry in the middle. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn the piece down to where it'll tell you roughly the shape of the bowl you want. You dry it out 2 to 6 months, whatever it takes. And then return it and finish it off, and that's what we'll deal with sometime later. I don't know what the schedule is, but we'll do that sometime later. But anyway, what we do is we start off, usually we get a piece that's been cut, you have half a log, like this. What I do usually is take it, put it down like this, get a disc. I made a set of these. Started off, I think, at 6-inch diameter and increased it by ½ inch up to about 12 or 13, and then by 1 inch up to 15, which is as big as my lathe would handle. And you lay this down here, center it on the block, tap a small little nail through here, and cut around it with the bandsaw. And what you end up with is a piece that looks more like this. It tends to get a little bit in better balance to begin with, and you don't spend all the time cutting off the corners on the lathe. It really works out, that's pretty handy. The other rules on what you want to do, you're very free here. You can cut a bowl to just about any shape you possibly can imagine. You can just make it look like your breakfast cereal bowl, just a round curved bowl. You could bring it over to curve over so it actually got an in-curved bowl. It could have straight sides. It could be a trumpet-shaped barrel. Whatever you want to do, it's a perfectly open thing. There are not a lot of rules as far as that goes. And all we're doing in this step is getting that first shape. So what we're going to do is mount the thing first. This way. Jam it up against the chuck here. Bring the tailstock up. Turn it so we get the outside shape the way we kind of want it. That's the first step. You've got several choices of how you're going to mount it on here. You can do it between centers. You can do it with a screw chuck. Just drill a hole in here and screw it onto the screw chuck. You can put a faceplate on here to hold it. There's advantages to both. The faceplate is the most stable. If you're worried about knocking a piece off, you're going to have less chance of doing it with a faceplate. The between centers is the most versatile. Because one of the things you find as you begin to turn this is maybe some feature of the wood is going to show out, and you're going to want to tip this a little bit around to accentuate that feature. If you do it between centers, you can do that. If you put it on a faceplate or by any other method you mount it, you're locked into whatever position you've got there, and you don't have a choice. The screw chuck is kind of the easiest and quickest to throw something up, but I don't like to use it on anything very big or heavy. Anyway, so what I'm going to do here, we're going to mount this between centers. I brought my favorite drive center. This is really good for big pieces. I've never seen one bigger. And it's the guy in St. Louis makes them. It's the only place I know to buy them. And what are they, about $100?
Yeah, Bill Rubenstein.
Yeah, right. Bill Rubenstein. There's several of us that are members down there, and if you're interested in something like that, let us know, and we can talk to them the next time we go to the St. Louis meeting and arrange for you to get one. But it's a really good piece. So what we're going to do is put this on here.
And it doubles as a punch.
What? Yeah, I got a guide hole punch. And here we take a wooden mallet so we don't mess up the piece. Drive it in. Come on. Bring up the tailstock. Whoops. I've knocked enough of the bark away from the center here that I can get to the center hole without having to have a lot of bark in between, which just gives a better grab on things.
Hey John, while that bark's on there, I've learned lately if I'm not making a natural edge bowl where I want to keep the bark, I take a hatchet and chop that bark off, and with a freshly ground gouge, I can cut a lot more wood.
Yeah.
Because that bark is so full of rocks and dust and dirt.
It's rough on your tool edge. By the same token, with green wood, it cuts pretty easy, and you can still get a long ways into the job without having to resharpen. Much better than when you're using dry wood. Anyway, so we get the thing mounted between there. We have several goals here that we want to accomplish. Basically, we want to end up with something roughly like this. The sidewall the thickness is about 10% of whatever the diameter of the piece is. In my case, I usually use a tenon. You could also use a recess to mount it in a chuck for the second turning, because once we get this done this way and get the outside formed, we're going to turn it over and hollow out the center. So we're going to either form a tenon or a recess here on the bottom that we can grab in our scroll chuck, like this one. And then basically what I want to teach is the Ellsworth techniques for doing this tonight. I spent the money to go to his class, so I might as well preach the lesson that I learned. And so he cuts a two-step thing with a tenon. The tenon here against this flat piece. Then he cuts kind of a secondary tenon, if you will. The reason for this one is when you're doing your final cuts, it gives you an easy way to see how to curve in here and put your bottom exactly the size you want it. It doesn't limit you to something that you're forced into, because you really can't see how that's going to go together if you don't have that there. So we got a tenon and this piece, form the outer thing. You may or may not put an extra rim on it. I'm not going to here. And that's what we're headed for. The long grind bowl gouge, which I'm going to use here, this is a 5-inch shafted bowl gouge. And the catalog is probably described as the 1/2-inch bowl gouge, because the width of the flute is 1/2 inch, which seems silly, but that's the way they sell them. And this is not the biggest bowl gouge you can buy, but it's the biggest one I've got, and it does anything I might want to do in a way that has like a 16-inch sling. You don't need anything bigger. Almost everything you're going to do in the bowl you can do with this gouge. There's very few things you have to go to a different tool. It's almost you don't need 500 tools if you're going to do bowls. You need one good one. The other side that's very useful, though, on the bowl gouge is the 1/2 inch the smaller bowl gouge. And I'm getting to the point where I use this one more and more all the time. It's a little bit easier to deal with on finishing cuts, so I won't need to use it tonight. But it's your secondary tool. Maybe when you're starting out and you're working with some smaller pieces or working on a mini lathe, it maybe should be your primary tool. It can make all the same cuts. It doesn't make them as big. So if you're trying to get in a hurry to finish up, then maybe it's not the best of the job. But if you want to cut smooth and safe, it's a very versatile tool. We've got a couple other specialty ones we'll get to later when we get to forming the tenon. What I'm going to do to start off with is use what's called a roughing cut. And we're going to start working from the bottom and around to the top. But instead of trying to come down and to get this round and slide straight across all the way up and down here to kind of help and not bang the tool around quite so much, we're going to set our tool rest at about a 45-degree angle and start here on this corner. I'm just going to back it off so I can get as close as I can be. I'm going to start right there. Small cuts, we're just going to cut this way.
What happens if you cut the other direction, John?
We'll cut during the process, we'll cut both ways, but
Yeah, but I mean, it'll be rough.
it's rougher on you because here you're going against the grain, coming back this way you're cutting with the grain. Does this show actual speed, or is this just kind of a percentage thing on this dial indicator? The faster things go, the smoother cut you can get. You don't want it to go so fast you get a lot of vibration on things. So that's what I was doing, is trying to just tune this in so it feels like it's running steady and at a decent speed to work with. I'm wearing my safety glasses with the shields on each side tonight in case that when I put this one on, you might not be able to hear me talking through it, but to start off with, I'm going to wear it anyway. Okay, now, tool firmly against the tool rest, parallel to the ground, hold the back of the chisel here with your hip, tilt this over so that the flute is kind of aimed at a 45-degree angle with the horizontal. These long shavings that come off are one of the delights of turning green wood. They just peel off. As we get further into the project, we can just send long slivers of shavings over the place with the right wood. It's the most fun thing you can do in wood turning, I think, is doing this part of turning the green bowl. Move the tool rest up, get in closer. I'm going to try to kind of move over here and use a similar cut going in toward the lathe to get some of this bottom cut off. about those shavings are just fun. Okay. This is cherry we're cutting. It's cutting very nicely. You can feel, and again, as you get through it, you see this is a pretty smooth cut. What I'm going to do next is mark where I want my tenon to be. And for that, I made a gauge or a template that is, and I made one for each set of my jaws that I have, but it allows me to do two things. One, down here at the bottom, it's cut so the distance between these posts is the smallest I can cut on the tenon size that I can grab with the jaws in here. The outside is the biggest that it can be. So when I open the jaws all the way up, I can still get them on, but it's the biggest it can be. On this side, I cut it for, if I want to do a recess, it's the same thing. The recess has to be within this distance right here. I can get the jaws to expand in there and expand them outwards and grab the bowl. It's kind of a dual function template. You can make the combination of kind of just measuring off the jaws once you have them. And the other thing is you always get instructions from the manufacturer on what the range is on any particular set of jaws, and you can just cut them to that size. But it's a very handy thing to have. In working with wet wood, there's another consideration to make. A lot of things you read and people say, there's an optimum size you can make this tenon so that when the jaws grab, they're grabbing all the way around on their surface. If you make it bigger, then on the clamp here, it's only the corners of the jaw here are going to grab, and you don't get quite as much hold. That's all well and good, but if the optimum size is very close to the smallest size that the tenon can be. And if you get a close look at this, you understand that when we turn this bowl a second time, I'm going to have to make this tenon smaller to get it round, because the bowl is going to dry oblong and form this thing out around, and the first thing I'm going to have to do in the next phase, six months from now, is turn this thing so it's round. So you have to make it a little bit big on the green bowl, so you got enough room to readjust it on the other side of the process.